to our airport through the law this year. Those dollars will be used to improve and enhance our airport. This money will help bring tourists, business travelers, and friends and family from across the world to our great city here in San Antonio, strengthening our regional economy, creating jobs, and cementing San Antonio as the world-class travel destination that it always has been. With that being said, I'd like to have Councilmember Courage come up and say a few words, and then he'll announce Congressman Castro.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you very much to Jesus and his staff. They have done a fantastic job on working on the future growth and development and improvement of this airport since he's come on. And I'm very proud of the growth and the work that's been going on here. I'm the councilman for District 9, and the airport is in my district. So I've always tried to pay particular attention to the needs that the airport has and the needs that the people who are flying in and out of our airport have. We bring in 2019, over 10 million people, flew in to San Antonio. And we know now we are on a track to go ahead and increase that going into the future. But we always need the support of our federal government. We recognize that the airline industry relies on the support of the federal government, whether it's the airlines themselves or the airports that we're in today. And so the congressman plays a very vital role, all the congressmen do, in helping us continue with the growth and development and improvement of our airlines and our airfields like we have right here. The congressman, you know, is a hometown congressman for us. He's done just a great job of representing our community, and we know that he is always working to better all of the amenities, the facilities, the benefits that this city has to offer to our citizens. So I'd just like to thank him for his service. I know he's going to be continuing to look at this airport and what we can do to improve it, and I really appreciate him being here today to go on this tour. Thank you. Welcome, Congressman, back home.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I want to first say thank you to John Courage, who's been a wonderful public servant representing District 9 on the San Antonio City Council, and especially over the last few years, a great partner during this pandemic in helping San Antonians bounce back and helping the city of San Antonio and this airport bounce back during the pandemic. And after, well, we're not done yet, but hopefully as we find brighter days ahead. And also, thank you to Jesus Saenz, the director of the airport, for all of his incredible work. San Antonio is lucky to have this gentleman who came to us from many years overseeing Houston airports, or helping oversee the Houston airports. And as we were talking, and he told me that he came to San Antonio just shortly before the pandemic hit. And I shared with him my experience. You know, I've been flying pretty consistently from the San Antonio airport since about 1992. When I went to college and would come back a good bit. And I remember that my last flight back home to San Antonio when the pandemic started was somewhere around March 12th or 13th. And then we got called back into session in Washington, I believe, in late April. And when I came here, it was a ghost town. And there were about 15 people on my flight, my Southwest Airlines flight, from San Antonio to Baltimore. But throughout all of it, the folks here at the airport were working hard, keeping everything moving, keeping people safe, making sure that San Antonians had a way to continue to travel. And so for that, Jesus, I want to say a big thank you on behalf of San Antonians to you and your team for all of the work that you're doing. And you all know that the San Antonio airport is important to our city for different reasons. Number one, over the years, San Antonio has been a favorite destination spot for people from all over Texas, the country, and different parts of the world. And that would not be possible, bringing all of those people for March Madness, for the Stock Show and Rodeo, for whatever, for the large conferences and conventions that we have. That wouldn't be possible but for the San Antonio International Airport and the people that work here. And so it speaks to the need to continue to grow the capacity at the airport and to make sure that we have money for the maintenance. That's why the $75 million that Congress appropriated during the pandemic has been especially important but also the $11 million that the airport has gotten just this year now from the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed not too long ago that I was proud to support. I'm also going to be helping, along with other members of the Bexar County delegation, in supporting the airport's grant. There's $1 billion that the FAA is going to put out to bid to allow airports to compete for, including medium-sized airports like San Antonio. And I told Jesus that I want to make sure that we're as supportive as possible in supporting their bid and propping up their bid so that we can continue to grow this airport. Because it's important not just for tourism, but we've often spoken about growing San Antonio industries, making sure that this is not only a hub for tourism, but for trade and for continued job growth in San Antonio. And again, the only way we're going to do that is to have a successful and growing airport. And San Antonio realizes that. The City Council passed in November about a $2.5 billion plan for growth through 2040. There's no way that growth happens without the help of the federal government and without the coordination of state, local, and federal partners. And so I wanted to come here today, in addition to saying thank you, but also to talk about how important it is that we grow our airport in the coming years if we're going to continue to grow as a city and be successful, and also attract new, different corporate headquarters. You know, we've heard horror stories over the years. I know in 2008 when AT&T left, one of the things they mentioned was that there were not enough nonstop flights from the San Antonio International Airport. We never want to lose a big employer like that because of a capacity issue at our airport or because of the routes that we don't have. And so all of us working together are going to do everything that we can to make sure the capacity is there. So with that, Director, thank you very much. And John, I look forward to working with you and the council on making sure that 2040 plan is successful. And we'll be glad to take questions here as a stand-up there so that we're not yelling at each other the answers to the questions back and forth. Thank you.
Good job, thank you.
And then he has a hard stop. So if you want to ask 10 questions first, we'll do that, and then Jesus and Councilman Curry.
Can I put this on? Yeah, y'all got set up. Go ahead, Yeah.
That's got a clip you want to just put in your pocket or something.
That good?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Right there. So what do you want me to look at? Maybe right down the middle?
Yeah, right down the middle.
All right.
Are you ready?
Ready? Yeah, go for it.
How optimistic are you that the $2 billion funding will come through in the next 20 years?
Sorry, say that.
How optimistic are you that this $2 billion in funding is going to come through in the next 20 years?
I'm optimistic that we can get it done. It'll be a combination of fees that are collected here, help from the federal government. But look, I think we ought to go to everybody. We ought to go to the state government and figure out how else the local government can help, because the success of this airport will largely determine the overall economic success of the city.
Congressman, let me ask you about Ukraine. We've been watching what's going on there. Now talks about Russia cutting off ties with the U.S. What does the U.S. need to be doing this week when it comes to helping stop the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, if you look at what we've been doing, we've been supporting Ukraine militarily as much as possible. We've encouraged our European allies to do the same. We have done everything we can to establish humanitarian routes for escape, even though the Russians are violating much of that. We've also placed the most severe sanctions on Russia that the world really has ever seen, certainly in any kind of modern era. And so we have essentially strangled the Russian economy right now. I believe the Russian people in real time are turning against Vladimir Putin. Even yesterday there were reports about the head of the FSB and other Russian elites turning against Vladimir Putin. And I think all of that is going to make a difference and is making a difference.
What do you think about that, about some of the high-ranking, powerful people in Russia starting to turn? Were you surprised by that?
No, not at all. I mean, before this started, I said that that I thought that if Vladimir Putin went through with an invasion of a sovereign country, as he's now done, that he would see the largest protest and the most people in Russia turning against him that he's ever seen. It would be something completely unlike he's ever seen before. And that's exactly what's happening now. And I don't think this is sustainable for Vladimir Putin. I don't think that in 5 years he's going to be president of Russia. Could be surprised, he could still be, but I think the pressure is going to get to him, and I think he's going to be replaced.
Why is it time? I'm sorry about that.
Sure.
Why is it time for the administration to stop using Title 42?
Man, Title 42 was a Trump-era policy that was put in place even though at the time the CDC didn't recommend it. It wasn't a recommendation by the CDC. And so what it's doing is essentially stopping people from even applying for asylum and having their case heard while they wait in the United States for that to happen. These are people who have mothers and fathers here, people that have brothers and sisters here. And you see, most recently it's come up because it's affected the Ukrainians who are actually trying to make their way to the United States. And the government has had to make a special exception for them. And I think that exception is, I think that they should be able to come here and petition for asylum. There are also people from Central America who are experiencing a kind of slow burn in their own nations, not an active war, but you've got oppression by these drug dealers, by gang members, chaos in different parts of the society. And so they're also fleeing very desperate, dangerous situations.
Congressman, you have very openly criticized the governor's Operation Lone Star and the National Guard's efforts down the border right now. And following what you just said, you sent the letter for an investigation. What is the status on that, and has there been any change? And how is that affecting, especially the refugees coming from Ukraine?
Yeah, no, I'll be honest with you. We're waiting for a response. I would expect that with the facts that have been presented, that the Department of Justice would take a look at what Greg Abbott has done. I'll just give you one example, the violation of people's constitutional rights. You can't keep people in jail for months at a time, sometimes without telling them reportedly what they're charged with, not letting them contact any relatives, not letting them bail out, none of that. I mean, that's a violation of people's constitutional rights, and all of that for trespassing. I think people have to understand, if you or I went onto somebody's property and we were charged with trespassing, that would either be a fine, we would be fined, or if they did want to take us in and book us in jail, you would be out the same day. That's not something that you keep people in jail for months and months at a time, or even for weeks and weeks at a time. So he's violating people's constitutional rights. He didn't do right by the guardsmen and guardswomen because he cut their educational benefits. We've seen story after story now by people in the Guard who say that their mission is just sitting around waiting, even though the governor and others describe it as a crisis at the border. They're saying firsthand, we don't see any crisis here. And then we had recent reporting also where the governor apparently stationed some of these Guard folk in front of wealthy ranches. And you got to wonder, were some of these people big campaign contributors to the governor? Or is he trying to help particular landowners by doing this? So, I'm surprised that you see some cities in South Texas, for example, that may be thinking about joining this operation because the governor has asked them to. I mean, this is a growing scandal. I don't know what mayor or what county judge or which sheriff would be interested at this point in being part of what is a growing scandal.
And how do you feel, people are watching this in San Antonio, they said the border's 2.5 hours away, this doesn't affect me, while we're looking at many migrants sitting upstairs, ready to go on to their next destination. How would you say that affects?
Well, I think the people of San Antonio are right in the sense that this picture that the governor likes to create for political purposes of all of these brown people coming and trying to kill everybody, because that's what he's insinuating, is that all these people are out to harm folks. And we know that's not the case. And I'll tell you very clearly that Greg Abbott's negligence during the Winter Storm Uri was responsible for more deaths of Texans than those migrants sitting upstairs.
Reportedly, going back to Title 42, reportedly there are concerns from the administration about the influx of immigration if Title 42 stops. Is that a valid concern? Something the administration can handle?
Yeah, I think practically speaking, of course, it's a concern. You have to be prepared as the administration to handle that and to deal with the influx. But the fact is, part of it is that the Trump administration and the Biden administration created its own problem by keeping this policy in place for 2 years. You know, the United States, we're asking right now, we're asking nations in Europe and around the world to take in Ukrainian refugees and asylum seekers, and at the same time, our asylum process is shut off in a way that it hasn't been shut off, at least in contemporary American history.
We've heard some reports about Ukrainians showing up in California. Do we know if any Ukrainians have shown up on the Texas border? Have you heard any reports on that?
I would imagine so. You know, we'd have to go double check, but I gotta imagine, look, desperate people are gonna do what they can to survive. And if some of them have relatives here, which I know some do, then they're going to do everything they can to be reunited with their relatives. And you know, it's just like with the Central Americans. The Ukrainians, if they could, I'm sure would not have trekked thousands of miles to come to the United States. They're not coming to go to Disneyland. They're not coming to go to Fiesta, Texas. They're coming because there's a war that's ravaging their country, an invasion by their neighbor. And the Central Americans, the same thing. You know, they're trekking 1,000 miles is not just a fun thing for them to do. It's because they're living in very dangerous conditions down there. And our asylum process has to be respectful of that reality.
Yeah, I got some more, two more at least.
Yep.
If the public health order is rescinded, what is your message to Republicans who would be critical of the administration's handling of immigration?
But the Republicans are going to be critical of the administration regardless, right? Whether they keep Title 42 in place, Republicans are going to say you have open borders. If you take Title 42 away, they're going to say you have open borders. You got to understand, in Texas especially, because we have a 1,200-mile border with Mexico, the number one boogeyman for Republicans in Texas is the border. Their number one thing is to scare white Texans that all these brown people are coming to harm you. That's what they do. That's what they do over and over. That's their number one political thing.
And one more thing about the airport.
Yeah, man, that'd be great to talk about the airport.
I know. What is it about federal funding? Why is that needed for the airport? You said up there that it was the federal government that would be able to do that. Why is it the federal funding that is needed?
Well, you can imagine, as the federal government obviously has a lot more resources to fund huge projects here, like expanding a runway, for example, or creating another Terminal C. The amount of money that you would need to generate locally in fees or taxes or whatever it may be, that's a pretty high amount. So you really need to lean on the federal government. But I do think that the state government could be more helpful in stepping up, and we ought to go after that money as well. All right, y'all.
Thank you.
Okay? All right.
I hate reading from a list of questions.
Good job. Glad I could hear you. No, that's okay. I mean, you did a great job.
No, that was.